race it. It also has, you know, Wasteland and Rashad Import. So if it can put pressure on Lee's mana, then he certainly has a lot of opportunity there to kind of take advantage of that. But let's see what Andrew does here. Lee leads with a dark creeping tar pit. Let's see if Andrew has a Mother of Runes or an Aether Vial here. Aether Vial obviously huge in this matchup. So yep,
and there we go.
Aether Vial, what really probably the most important card in the deck. Really makes the deck function. That along with Mother of Runes.
Yeah. So Lee will continue just to develop his mana in this matchup. Because of, like, both decks are just these slow grinding decks, right? Does one player have to assume the aggro role here?
Not necessarily. It's more about just gaining gaining a dominant board state. I think both players are really capable of doing that, either with you know, Stoneforge Mystic or True Name Nemesis, or even Jace the Mind Sculptor at times. But Andrew can also really create this dominating board presence with Mother of Runes and all his utility creatures. So I think it's more about just creating a dominant board presence as opposed to beating down, because it's kind of difficult to beat down in this matchup.
Yeah, so right there, Lee fetches for Tundra, casts Stoneforge Mystic. Andrew certainly expects it. It's going to go ahead and get Umezawa's Jite, and Lee passes back.
So the good thing for Lee in this matchup is he has a lot of ways to kind of interact with Andrew's creatures. He's got Swords to Plowshare. He also has Jace, obviously. He's got one copy of Vindicate. He also has 2 copies of Liliana the Veil. So he has ways to kind of kill Andrew's creatures, where Andrew really doesn't have any ways to interact with Lee's creatures.
Yeah, and we see that actually in Lee's hand. It's one of that kind of combo that can shut down a Death and Taxes deck. He found the Umezawa's Jite, and he already had a True Name Nemesis in hand. That is one of the interactions that Death and Taxes has a lot of trouble fighting over.
Yeah, and Andrew played a Rashad Import in his turn. Rather than keep it up to kind of tap down Lee on his turn, he decided to just cast Stoneforge Mystic, and he's going to find a Batterskull.
So he's opting to do that instead of playing a control game. I know that this matchup changed with the printing of True Name Nemesis. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, there's some urgency on the Death and Taxes player's side of things.
Yeah. And unfortunately for Lee, he did not find a 3rd mana, so not the ideal situation for him. He does have the Batterskull in play in his hand, which is why he did not search for it last turn. Now he's going to cast Brainstorm. He's going to try to find a 3rd land here, which it looks like he does.
Yeah, he found a 3rd land and a 4th, one of them being a fetch land, once again showcasing the power of Brainstorm. He will bin a 2nd copy of Brainstorm, it looks like. And he has actually 2 True Name Nemesis. He'd been 2 copies of Brainstorm.
Yeah, so at this point, I don't think he really cares about the cantrips anymore. He has 2 equipments, he has 2 True Name Nemesis, and a Deathrite Shaman. So
yeah, so actually he's shuffling away both copies of Brainstorm. So to you, that says he's just perfectly happy with the cards he has in his hand?
Yeah, he doesn't think he needs anything else. He's going to be able to get a Batterskull into play. However, Andrew does have a Mother of Runes now, so he'll be able to give his creatures protection from black, which the Germ token is.
Right. The difficulty, once again, will be, can Andrew fight over those 2 True Name Nemesis that are hanging out in Lee's hand? Once equipment gets onto them, remember, Andrew cannot win the fight over True Name Nemesis. The fight has to be fought over the equipment that Lee tries to put on it.
Yeah, so here we're in a situation where Andrew's just going to try to keep Lee off of 3 mana, which is, you know, the fact that Lee kind of shuffled away 2 of his Brainstorms, it's actually, it could happen. And that Andrew can still develop his board because of Aether Vial, which shows you just how powerful Aether Vial is.
All right, well, the end step Stoneforge activation will put Batterskull into play, as we see the Brian Bronduin token.
So let's see here. Is Andrew going to try to keep him off mana, or is he going to activate Stoneforge? Yep, it looks like he just cares more about activating that Stoneforge or getting the Batterskull into play.
Yeah, Andrew didn't have the 4th land, but he doesn't really need one thanks to Aether Vial.
Yeah.
You're right, land number 4 from Lee.
So Lee here, we could just see a True Name Nemesis and a Deathrite Shaman come into play this turn.
Yep, True Name, that's the card. Remember this card.
And you have to name a player. You have to name an opponent.
And now Andrew has to be concerned with that interaction. Lee, with his 5th land next turn, can throw a Batterskull onto True Name Nemesis, and at that point, Andrew will have very few ways to deal with the board.
Yeah, one of the few ways that Andrew has to deal with equipment is Phyrexian Revoker.
Exactly.
Phyrexian Revoker, you can actually put into play, name an equipment, but once the equipment is actually on the creature, it no longer stops the equipment.
Yeah.
So
at that point, he'd have to flicker wisp the equipment off the creature and then revoke it. Which that if he didn't have the Revoker in the first place, that's a pretty tall order.
Yep. So Aether Vial is going to get activated, and we're going to see another Stoneforge Mystic.
So he will get to put a equipment into play on end step. Now he can choose between multiple equipments. Where he plays Umezawa's Jite, Batterskull, and Sword of Fire and Ice in his deck.
Yeah, the question is here, he just, with only 2 mana, he really, even though he has Aether Vial going, he really doesn't have that much to work with. The problem is, you know, he has a Sword of Fire Ice, so he could get a Sword of Fire Ice here.
That's his only way to swing past True Name Nemesis. However, that doesn't swing past the Germ token at the moment.
Yeah, he could use the Mother Runes and be a little aggressive there. So if he activates the Mother Runes on one of his creatures that he equips, he could actually attack through the Germ token and the Deathrite Shaman. So let's see here what Andrew's going to do. He's going to get the Sword of Fire Ice. Is he going to activate Stoneforge and put the sword into play, or is he going to put the Batterskull into play? And yep, here comes Batterskull. So Batterskull's going to come into play. That'll give him a little life if he decides to block next turn. I mean, obviously he can't. He can choose to attack, but he's going to actually tap his Mother Runes to do it this turn. So don't think he wants to do that.
Yeah. So what is, if he doesn't have the Revoker in his hand, which it appears he doesn't, you know, what is his game plan? Does he have a good game plan to deal with this?
He has to try to race it, but again, Lee has both the Batterskull and the Jite, so I don't really see how you can race it in this situation. Andrew just doesn't have enough of board presence. One thing you could do is if you had a bunch of flyers in play, like he has cards like Serra Avenger and Flicker Wisp. Those cards can race in the air, but you can't really do anything if your opponent has the Jite on the True Name Nemesis. So yeah, it's going to be a tough spot for Andrew right here. Lee's board just developed too quickly for him. Andrew did draw a 3rd mana source, but again, he doesn't. He kept the Aether Vial at 2, so it doesn't look like he's going to be able to get a Flicker Wisp. So the option of, you know, Flicker Wisping the equipment off, it's not going to work.
Right. He'll pass back. Yeah, I know in the past this was that matchup that was actually pretty decent for Death and Taxes. True Name Nemesis really did change that though for the Death and Taxes player. Now I see Umezawa's Jite, that's put into play off Stoneforge Mystic, and because he has the mana, that will be equipped to True Name Nemesis. Now with no way to Flicker Wisp that equipment off, that's going to start going to work.
Yeah, so Andrew's going to take 3 from the True Name Nemesis, and more importantly, Umezawa's Jite will get 2 counters on it. So now we can see Mother Runes now can actually die to the Umezawa's Jite counters if Lee chooses, which is exactly what we're going to see happen.
Yep, first counter is used to take care of Mother Runes. He's going to give protection to his Germ token, perhaps protection from white, but
so
hits will continue.
Looks like Lee might have tapped a little incorrectly there. If he leads with the Tundra and keeps his black source up, he could actually activate the Deathrite Shaman if he chooses. But either way, he's still in a pretty good state right here. He's got True Name Nemesis. He could actually equip Batterskull next turn if he chooses to, and really get beefy.
So Andrew, with a nice trick he pulled out at the end on end step there, he put the Sword of Fire and Ice into play and Serra Avenger into play off Stoneforge Mystic and Aether Vial. That will give him a chance to equip the sword and attack with Serra Avenger, which will give him an extra card draw, and once again, more chances at finding a way to interact with the Jite and True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, because Phyrexian Revoker will still shut off the Umezawa Jite. If he activates Aether Vial and Lee does not respond, the Revoker will come into play, and it can name Umezawa Jite.
Yeah, and he does actually have a way to close out the game if he can get to that point. Well, never mind. I was going to say I believed he had a Mangara. He's not actually running that build, so he doesn't have a way to permanently exile equipment. One thing that actually Andrew's playing in his deck list that I wanted to point out, he's running 4 Spirit of the Labyrinth in the main deck. So that was... Yeah. I know Adrian Sullivan, for example, today is also playing Death and Taxes. He has it as a 1-of in the sideboard. Andrew with a much stronger endorsement of the card.
Yeah, so obviously it looks like he has 2 in his hand right now too, so not going to be really doing that much in this particular game, but he does get a hit off with Serra Avenger, so he hits Lee for 5 and takes out a Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, so he's getting some good damage in. Once again, this is going to be difficult for him because an active Umezawa's Jite is very hard to race, even with Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yeah, not only that, but he's actually could easily just equip.
Throw everything on the Nemesis.
Yeah, might as well just equip the Nemesis with Jite, with Batterskull.
You know, and in these fair Stoneforge Mystic style decks, True Name Nemesis really has changed how these matchups work. I know I've talked to a lot of players about ways to break this matchup or to somehow deal with this interaction. I've even seen players go as far as sideboarding in Circle of Protection Blue as a way to possibly deal with this interaction. A card from Alpha that's probably seen no play since its printing.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard Rune Halo. I've heard a lot of different cards that kind of try to deal with True Name Nemesis. The problem is that it still makes it an excellent blocker.
Yeah, that doesn't stop it. It just stops you from losing right then.
Yeah. So Andrew falls to 9 here because of the True Name Nemesis hit. True Name Nemesis is now a 7/5. It also has 3 counters on the Umajao Jete. So.
All right, Spirit of the Labyrinth now in play for Shrout. This is the new card from Theros. It's the one that certainly people thought would see the most legacy play, and Death and Taxes is where we think it would see play. Each player cannot draw more than 1 card per turn.
So Flicker Wisp is really the card Andrew wanted there.
Yeah, he ticked up his vial in anticipation of drawing 1.
Yep.
Remember, he does not have 2 white in play, so the vial is the only way Flicker Wisp will get on the battlefield.
Looks like he has a 4th land, but he's still 1 off from actually equipping the Batterskull onto the Serra Avenger.
Now, if he can make that equip, it's possible. I still don't think it's possible he could win the race. He's too far behind.
And I don't think he's going to get a chance to. He's not going to. He's going to die to Lee next turn. Lee's likely just going to pump his True Name Nemesis and just kill Andrew. So Andrew here in a tight spot. Not sure if there's really much he can do right here.
He gets a draw. The problem is even if he draws Flicker Wisp, the True Name is going to be active. It's going to be worth it for 9 damage, no matter what he Flicker Wisps.
Yeah, so he's going to get 1 draw here.
But 1 isn't enough. Well, no, he actually doesn't get a draw. Because of Spirit of the Labyrinth, he can't draw another card this turn.
Oh, but he Swords to Plowshare to Spirit of the Labyrinth in response.
Okay.
So he's going to gain a life, go to 10, and then he's going to deal with the Deathrite Shaman and now draw a card.
And that card was a Plains. That's not going to be any help.
Yeah, so I think Andrew's still dead. He goes up to 12.
He sorts his own creature, which means he's got... Well, True Name Nemesis is currently a 7/5, so it can pump for 6. It can pump up to 13 if Lee just puts all the counters into it.
Yeah, and I can't imagine he's not going to just pump all in.
Right now, he's swinging Andrew no blocks, and he's counting, I believe, whether or not this is lethal. Yep. So swing, remove all the counters, and that'll do it. Game 1 goes to Lee Prost.
So Lee was able to get a really good start. He got the Stoneforge Mystic into True Name Nemesis into the equip. So perfect start there for Lee. It just kind of shows you how difficult Andrew's deck has a time with a card like True Name Nemesis plus equipment. But after board, Andrew does have some options available to him.
Yeah, so after board, especially in a deck like Death and Taxes, they want to have lots of answers to True Name Nemesis after board, unsurprisingly. So the things he does have access to, he plays 3 copies of Zealous Persecution. That's something that can go ahead and deal with a True Name Nemesis as long as he can get that before Lee can stick an equipment to it.
Yeah, that's the key thing there. You really, it is an answer to True Name Nemesis, but it's kind of a conditional answer because obviously once the equipment's on, it turns off the Zealous Persecution.
In addition, he has 2 copies of Oblivion Ring, and once again, if you can fight over the equipment, it's actually possible to win that game. We saw there, if he was able to keep all the equipment off True Name Nemesis, that Serra Avenger with sort of Fire and Ice would have actually been enough to take the game for him.
Yeah, that's kind of why I see some lists play Manriki Gusari after board. I kind of like that because, again, you're right. True Name Nemesis on its own isn't the problem. It's True Name plus equipment.
Historically, Manriki Gusari has been an excellent answer for Umezawa's Jete, basically since the printing of the cards.
Yeah.
It still is at this point. Other cards that we see in a sideboard that could be used here, Cataclysm, something that is often boarded in some of the more fair matchups.
Not sure you can bring that one in.
I do know that when we saw this was playing for the Invitational Top 8 in Somerset. We were seeing a lot of Death and Taxes. We saw a Death and Taxes player bring this in against Deathblade. Well,
Lee's deck is obviously very mana hungry.
Right.
So given the right situation on the draw, particularly, I could see Andrew kind of bringing in that card. Particularly just because if you can get like a flyer and equipment into play before Lee can do anything, just wiping the board is probably a good spot for him. So yeah, I could see a couple of Cataclysm. Probably not in the draw though. Probably more in the play.
Maybe just on the play. The last card he uses is he has a 1 of Enlightened Tutor in his sideboard. That can go ahead and get an Oblivion Ring for him if he needs. It's a decent tutor. I think it's also interesting that card has gained additional utility because it can find Spirit of the Labyrinth, as that card is an enchantment creature.
Interesting. On Lee's side of the board, he has a couple options available to him. He plays 3 Rest in Peace, 2 Aether Storm Canonist, and 2 Mentally Mages. I don't really see those cards coming in this particular matchup. Meddling Mage could be useful, but again, Aether Vial will probably be able to get anything that he names into play anyway. He's got 1 copy of Flusterstorm, 1 Notion Thief. Again, same thing, Vendilion Click. Those cards probably not really for this matchup. Cards that I do like, though, he's got 2 copies of Supreme Verdict. That card I actually like a lot in this matchup, especially when you're on the draw. There are times where Andrew kind of really has to just expose himself to Supreme Verdict. He can't afford to kind of hold stuff back. He kind of has to press his advantage.
He is, at the end of the day, just a creature deck, right?
Yeah. So Supreme Verdict I like here. He's also got 1 copy of Pining Needle, which, again, I like because of how important Aether Vial is for Andrew's deck. If you could shut down Aether Vial or even Mother Runes, that can be really huge.
Aether Vial's big. Equipment's big, too, worth needling.
Yeah, and he also has a copy of the Tension Sphere, which, again, can deal with equipment, can also deal with the creatures, and 1 copy of Zell's Persecution, which can kind of blow out Andrew at times because he has a lot of 1 toughness creatures in his deck. He's got Mother Runes, Phyrexian Revoker, Spirit in the Labyrinth, Flicker Wisp, Aven Mind Sensor, so a lot of cards that can die to
Most
his
of his deck, actually. Thalia as well. I would say
Thalia.
Almost all his creatures are 1 toughness.
Basically, the only creature that doesn't die is Stoneforge Mystic and Serra Avenger.
That is it. Yep.
So, yeah, pretty good card for Lee. Unfortunately, he only has 1, so, but still, a lot of good options for him. 2 Supreme Verdict, a Zealous Persecution, and a Pining Needle, so, and a Detention Sphere. So 5 cards that are pretty good in this matchup.
Would you say this gets stronger for Shrout post-board? Certainly, it seems like pre-board, his inability to deal with True Name Nemesis is a really important part of the matchup.
Again, it all comes down to whether or not he can deny Lee's mana. But if Lee can generate his mana, his spells are just much more powerful. He's got and after board in particular, he boards out the cards like Force of Will, which aren't really great in this matchup. So I think and Spell Pierce. So I think it gets a lot better for Lee because Lee has like cards like Thoughtseize and Inquisition, which can be problematic. So it really comes down to whether or not Andrew can kind of tie up Lee's mana.
All right. So we are underway. Andrew with a turn 1 Scrub land. No play on that. Lee's actually going to get the first play of the game down. He's fetching for Underground Sea. Now, he does play cards like Thoughtseize and Inquisition. Do those stay in here or no?
Yeah, I like both cards just because, again, with Stoneforge Mystic being such a key card in this matchup, being able to get rid of it, either get rid of it or get rid of the equipment that they find up, that can be huge.
All right, well, Lee's turn on play was a Deathrite Shaman. That quickly traded with a Swords to Plowshares from Andrew's hand. Lee goes up to 21, and Andrew will Wasteland back, going, as you said, on the Mana Denial plan.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty big for Andrew. It looks like he has another Wasteland. Unfortunately, Andrew doesn't have any pressure on the board, and Lee does have a Brainstorm. So as long as he is able to kind of find some more lands, he's actually not in that bad shape right now.
Yeah. Now, one thing is we see a Brainstorm here finding Jace, Zealous Persecution, and others. We notice that Lee also has a Wasteland in his hand. When your opponent's a Reshut and Port deck, do you still Wasteland your opponent from Lee's side, or just treat every land as a land draw?
Given that he hasn't seen Black Game 1 and now he sees a Scrub land, I think I would be a little skeptical as to what that is. So I actually don't mind just playing a Wasteland and Wastelanding a Scrubland right here.
Right. He's going to go for his own mana development first. He has Marsh Flats. He's going to leave that uncracked as a defense against Wasteland, which Andrew does have.
Yeah, I think the main reason he also leads with the Marsh Flats is, one, he has a Stoneforge in his hand, so he can cast it next turn with a Wasteland. And plus, at the end of Andrew's turn, as long as Andrew doesn't play a Wasteland or a Reshut and Port, he could actually sack it and get rid of the card left on top of his library, which I think was a Jace.
Yeah,
which is
really
good right now.
Wasteland is a play for Andrew. He will play Phyrexian Revoker.
So in response, Lee wisely sacks Marsh Flats in response to the Revoker because Andrew could name Marsh Flats.
Yeah, Revoker does not say non-land permanent. Revoker is just like Pithing Needle in that it can hit any permanent. Just means, but the mana abilities can still be played. So he's going to go ahead and search up that Tundra.
And Lee does have a Zealous Persecution in his hand. He also has a Swords to Plowshare.
Actually, we're going to go ahead and say, correct myself here. Revoker cannot name Marsh Flats.
Okay.
It is non-land. But it's the other way around. It can hit mana abilities.
Yes.
But the Revoker is on Jace. That won't matter as Lee Swords to Plowshares the Revoker. Both players back to one land. We've seen a lot of Wastelanding happening. 3 Wastelands.
And he Wastelanded Andrew's Wasteland, so now he's able to, he's drawing the mana he needs, and this is exactly what we're talking about. Andrew was able to mana denial Lee, but Lee drew out of it, and Andrew actually had no pressure in play, so he wasn't able to press any of that advantage.
Yeah, well, Andrew missed the first land drop, is the thing. That last turn, Andrew didn't have a land to replace the one that was wasted, so he's now behind on lands, and as a result, it's Lee who first resolves a Stoneforge instead of Andrew.
So Andrew's going to play a Marsh Flats, so he's going to search up a Plains. He might play Stoneforge of his own, but Lee in pretty good shape here. He's still got that Zealous Persecution. We were talking about how good that is in this matchup. He's also got a second Stoneforge Mystic as well, along with that True Name Nemesis, and I believe a third land that even casted.
And to me, what really, where I think Deathblade had the advantage in the early game, it's really incremental. But the fact that the Deathblade player had a Brainstorm in his deck and Andrew didn't as a Death and Taxes player, I think really smoothed out this early game for Lee. He was able to get some card selection. And as a result, you know, when they get in this attrition battle of who can draw more lands, Lee ended up ahead. And I feel like that's expected when he's playing the blue cards.
Yeah, well, if you're a Wasteland deck and you're not playing blue, you kind of feel bad because you're basically expending resources on your opponent, but your opponent has ways to kind of search their deck, manipulate their deck, and kind of draw out of it because you're losing a land too. It's a one-for-one exchange there. So if you're not a tempo-based deck and you're not able to press that advantage, you're not really doing much, especially if you can't smooth out your draws and make sure you can continue making land drops.
All right, well, Stoneforge Mystics now will stare down each other. Andrew plays one of his own. His will find Batterskull. We are back to Lee's turn.
And, wow, so pretty good draw there for Lee. He drew a Thoughtseize, so that Batterskull is going to get taken likely.
Yep. Mainstay of Standard, mainstay of Legacy.
So this could be basically the old school way to win, where it's just Stoneforge Mystic, you Stoneforge Mystic, I'll Thoughtseize your Batterskull, I'll put my Batterskull to play, and I'll just win with that.
I'll win that way. So we see in addition to the Batterskull, there's a Flicker Wisp, 2 Serra Avengers, and a Phyrexian Revoker in Shrout's hand. Probably that Revoker is the most concerning card for Lee, as it shuts off. It can shut off part.
Well, Flicker Wisp is actually interesting too. We're going to bring up that for you. It's a card that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with because it wasn't played a lot in Standard, but it's played a lot in Legacy. And if he draws a third land, he could actually cast it, and it'll allow him to deal with the Batterskull for a turn at least. I mean,
yeah,
eventually.
He gets rid of the Germ token.
Yeah, so Lee will get an attack off the Germ token, but if he draws a third mana, he can play the Flicker Wisp, blink the Germ token, and he'll basically require Lee to activate Batterskull, return it to his hand, and then replay it.
Once again, the lack of mana is coming to haunt Shrout. He did not draw a third land that turn. He drew a Spirit of the Labyrinth. He was forced to just pass the turn.
Yeah, so Lee is in firm control of this game right here. He's able to just drop a Batterskull into play. I don't think Andrew has any equipment left in his hand.
So he's leaving up the mana for...
He might just be bluffing a second Batterskull perhaps, or maybe he does have a sword, I'm not sure. Might just feel that Spirit of the Labyrinth really isn't that relevant right now.
And I mean, that certainly is true when you're facing down a 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink. So Lee makes the Batterskull on end step, and then it is accompanied by its friend. That will be True Name Nemesis. Andrew Shrout jokingly taps Stoneforge and pulls the Batterskull out of his graveyard.
I thought I misread Stoneforge for a second.
Let's see if that one's going to fly. I don't think it is. Oh, well, unfortunately it's in the graveyard. Huh. Dang, that one didn't work well.
You don't get to number 15 in the player standings for no reason.
You can tell Andrew says he's just got no plays here.
This is not. This is a tough spot for Andrew. It's just too much to deal with, too much to contend with. And part of the reason that, you know...
Yeah, he's like, I'll put this in out of the graveyard. That'd be a pretty strong card if he could do that.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason I didn't rank Death and Taxes as a tier 1 deck, so to speak, because your Esper Blade matchup can be very, very rough.
Yeah.
You obviously have a good show and tell matchup, and I think your matchup against Rug Delver is actually reasonable too.
Well, I think
it's just the Esper Blade matchup.
There are some decks in Legacy that I like to call I would say are powerful in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
They're decks that are just, what they're doing is really unfair. It's really strong. Death and Taxes to me is not one of those decks. I think what it does is very well positioned against a lot of the other decks in the format. Caracas really preys upon the fact lots of players play Show and Tell. It does have Stoneforge Mystic, one of the more powerful engines. But I think at the end of the day, right now, we're kind of seeing Andrew get bullied by the fact that Lee is just playing stronger cards than Andrew is.
Yeah, and I think Death and Taxes also has a very interesting strategy where, it kind of takes advantage of Aether Vial a lot. So the deck looks great when it goes turn 1 Aether Vial, and it also plays 4 Shroud Port and 4 Wasteland. So it does have that mana denial strategy as well. So I think there are things about the deck that even though they're not playing cards that are as powerful as other decks that we've seen, it could still kind of compete simply because it has a strategy. And sometimes, even if your card quality isn't that powerful, having a strategy is really more important than anything else.
All right, so a swing there from Batters. The Germ token and the True Name Nemesis will drop Andrew's health total down to 10. Andrew did name Batterskull on that Revoker, so the Batterskull will not be moving over a True Name Nemesis, and that won't be moving anywhere as Flicker Wisp takes care of the Germ Token.
Thankfully, there is that Zealous Persecution, which can 2-for-1 Andrew right here. And if Lee draws another land, he'll be able to equip True Name Nemesis with Batterskull, because the Revoker will no longer be in play.
And this is where Zealous Persecution is huge. Goes ahead and it will pump Prost's team, take care of both the hate cards from Shrout, and that will be the match. Lee Prost, 2-0 defeats Andrew Shrout.
Yeah, and that was that was a rough spot for Andrew. I mean, again, True Name Nemesis, equipment. It's just too many cards that you have to contend with.
So, all right, I'm going to have this is an example question. So,